Hey kids, this is Ivan. How you doing? Well, these days I try to make my videos nice. I try to be polite. I try not to be pugnacious or engage in too many polemics. But today's video is not going to be quite as nice. I'm going to try to be as nice as possible. It's going to be a bit of a rant. It's a video response to Runeslinger, to Anthony Boyd. And he made a couple videos so far. He's probably going to make a third in this series. And it's on quality and consequence. And it's specifically about quality or lack thereof in role-playing games, specifically a lack of quality in the text itself. And so we're not talking about the idea that the game itself is bad, that the mechanics are bad, that it doesn't work. Let's say that it's already a good game, it's been well designed. It's something in the writing, in the editing, in the proofreading. Somewhere in there, the text that gets to us is subpar. And there's a whole bunch of ways that this can show up. And I'm copying a bunch of them off of what he said. But there's a lack of competent editorial oversight and proofing in the product. There's missing words, there's typographical errors, there's missing sentences, there's cut and paste errors that you find in these books sometimes. There's examples that don't match the text, examples of play or what have you. There's games where it uses the author as an editor, and I found throughout my life, and it's very true in the line of work I'm in right now, is it's really hard, if not impossible, for you to check your own work. You need somebody else to take a look at that. An inconsistent tone in the game itself, where just the instructions that you're being given on how to play it, the field you're going for, all this kind of stuff, it changes, it varies throughout the text, and so you're not getting consistency that way. Sometimes just plain old confusing text where you read it and reread it and think, I can't figure out exactly what I'm supposed to do here. And the instructions sometimes are just scattered throughout the entire book. So, as he's mentioned a bunch of times, there's something on page 10, and the rest of that instruction, well, it's on page 100, and it's separated by all this area. And sometimes it's just text that is difficult to learn from, and text that is difficult to reference during the game itself. That's really, really problematic. Now, a lot of money in role-playing games gets spent on art and layout and on marketing, and this is the conventional wisdom in the role-playing game world. That's just really important. You've got to have good art. You've got to have really good, stellar layout. This is what sells the product. I like art just as much as the next person, but to me, that's not why I bought your product. I bought it because of the text. I want to learn the game. I want to be able to play the game. The art is kind of a little bit of icing on the cake. The layout is sort of icing on the cake. These are things that are less interesting to me. It's more, do they enhance the experience or reading the book? Is the layout going to help me read the book, or is the layout going to get in my way? Is the art going to get in my way? But that's a topic for another time. Now, it can be a little bit different for me, like if I'm buying something from an independent, small, just starting out producer, maybe he's charging $5 or $10 or $15 for a book. I can excuse a little bit more, although, overall I think it's kind of not excusable these days anyway. But I've had conversations with little small producers, hey man, you need to do a better job next time of like proofing this, or get somebody to read over here because you've got some typographical errors or what have you. But a lot of role-playing games, we're talking like 30, 40, 50, 60, 70, 80, 90, upwards of $100 for a book sometimes. And I get it. It's a niche market. I'm used to buying products in niche markets. As being a bass guitar player, there's not a lot of market for these products, especially like some of the high-end ones. So it's going to cost a little bit, because there's not that many people buying them. And plus, the cost of books these days, if you go into Barnes & Noble or Art Julia booksellers or whatever, they're expensive. I get that. But listen, some guy in 1974 with a typewriter shouldn't be able to do a better job of editing and putting out a cohesive piece of text than somebody today. That just shouldn't happen. And, we wouldn't accept this lack of quality, these kind of errors, that's kind of confusing text, or something in a product that just didn't work out. We wouldn't accept that lack of quality in other books, and we wouldn't accept it in other investments or other purchases. And I've had a lot of discussions with some of my friends, some of whom are involved in writing games, or are writers, or have they're involved in some way. And they gave me a lot of reasons why something like this might happen. And sometimes it's just plain old a lack of resources. You don't have enough money to spend on editing and proofing and all that sort of stuff. And part of what Anthony brought up, I would go watch his videos because he's much more experienced than I in this sort of thing, is the idea that you need to have an editor come in there and somebody that knows what the project is supposed to be like, and to make sure that the tone matches. You can't do that yourself as an author or authors. You need to have proofers to come in and say, okay, well, is this understandable? That sort of thing. Maybe there's not resources. Maybe it's just kind of hard. It's hard to be a writer, and all that sort of stuff. And there's a bunch of other reasons. And not to be unpleasant, I don't care. These are excuses. When you're selling me a role-playing game, what you're asking me to do is trade a portion of my life via working for a living, trading my hours for dollars, to then fork over my resources to you to give me this product. And you're asking for my time, you're my money. So you darn well better be able to put your resources in there first if you want my dollars. And then, after you've already taken a portion of my life, of which I have one, okay, now I'm going to get this product, and maybe it's so confusing that it's going to take me a lot more of my life, more time, to understand this, because it's written in such a way that's just incomprehensible, or I have to search around. There's a problem with the text. That's inexcusable to me. It's not something that I would accept from anything else. And I can hear some people already say, well, writing a role-playing game is hard. You ought to try it. And let me ask you this: if you bought a car and it was a defective car, and you brought it back to the dealership or whoever else sold it to you, would you accept them saying, well, you try to make a car? No, it's a product. It ought to be good. You're asking for my money at this point. And there's these moments, especially when the game is really not well written, or the editing, something in that whole process. I'm not picking on writers in general, because it's very difficult to write instructions. I've done it myself. But if 3 or 4 guys, with IQs north of $130 are sitting around and we can't figure out what the procedure is, how we're supposed to do this, there's a problem. And sometimes if you I've had the experience of asking an author or somebody a question in a forum, or seeing somebody else asking this question in a forum, and the author or somebody involved with the project is able to explain, well, this is how this works. If you can explain it there, why couldn't you put it in the book? That's something that's really important to me. If somebody like, say, Isaac Asimov, who was pretty much a polymath, could write little short essays on just about everything, every conceivable topic, and take the driest, most uninteresting topics and make them interesting, the most complicated topics, and break them down so you understood how this worked. Of course, he was talented, but the idea is that ought to be something that we should expect from a designer, a writer of a role-playing game, something that we can read it and understand, and then go back and reference easily what this procedure is supposed to be. It's just, and I had some of my friends say, well, Asimov had a target audience, and once again, I don't buy it, because he wrote about everything. It wasn't just about things that science fiction nerds would geek out on. It's quite a bit of stuff. So really, really important to me. And I'll give you some, the problem too, as Anthony brought out, and I was hoping to say this earlier in the video, not just rail against the producers of such products. A lot of the fault with this problem that exists now, with this subpar text, it lies with us. It lies with the buyers. And I'll give you a couple examples from the bass and guitar world to kind of give you an idea. I mean, it's not the best analogy, but it's a good parallel. I haven't picked up a lot of bass and guitar magazines lately, but back in the day, not so long ago, you pick these magazines up, and generally, every once in a while, you get somebody that was kind of blowing smoke up somebody's rear end. But for the most part, the reviews could be scathing. If product was good, they will let you know this product is good. But sometimes, you'd read I can't believe they bothered to paint this, and they couldn't even get that right. And very often there would be this is inexcusable in a product of this at this price point, because in basses and guitars you can buy something for $200-300. It's kind of entry level all the way up to several $1,000s. There's things that are excusable in some sort of product that aren't excusable in another sort of product, because now you're asking somebody to shell a lot of money. They're paying boutique money. They should expect some kind of boutique product as a result. And as Anthony talked about, there's this idea of boutique or deluxe editions of various games. Now, I'll give you an example. Fender, I'm just picking on this company for no reason, and if you want to argue with me, go ahead and argue with me, but that doesn't really make a difference. Fender's notorious for having inconsistent quality in their instruments. It's just part of what happens. They're a mass production company. So you play 10 different jazz basses or Stratocasters, you're going to play 10 very different instruments. So what you can do is spend more money. You can buy a custom shop instrument. You can even go ahead and order a master built from one of their builders. So maybe you want to get yourself a John Cruz Strat or whatever. It costs a lot more money, but that is a deluxe instrument. That is, you play that side by side with your standard American jazz bass or Strat or what have you. You're like, I've had this experience. You're like, wow, this is a really good instrument. Putting a leather cover and gold edging and everything else on your 20th anniversary edition of something that has just bad text is putting lipstick on a pig. That's not cool. But we're buying them. That's a problem. And as gamers, I believe, not that I'm going to call to arms, but at some point we need to say, no, I'm not going to purchase this. I've read the PDF. I've watched somebody else's review. This isn't that great. And part of the problem for us is there's a lack of competition. And what are you talking about, Ivan? There's thousands of role-playing games. Of course there's competition. You can buy this one instead of that one because it's better. Well, no, hear me out. Here's the difference between role-playing games and something like these basses and guitars. Now, if I want to buy a jazz bass, a Fender jazz bass, but I want to get a really good one, but that's the kind of style of a bass I want to get, I can go buy some boutique instrument by Sadowski or Mike Lull or Valentino or etc. It's still going to be a jazz bass. It's just a much better one. There's competition in that market. In fact, no matter what the setup is, I'm going to buy a bass guitar. It's pretty much the same darn thing. Maybe there's 5 strings instead of 4, different pickup arrangements, but it's a bass guitar. I'm going to be able to play the same sort of music on this instrument. Okay, there's a lot of competition in that market, and ergo, there's some pretty good stuff that's out there. But contrast this with role-playing games. If I want a particular game, this company has released their 20th anniversary edition or the deluxe edition of that. It's a property that they own the sole rights to. I can't go buy System X, Game X from somebody else. They can make something similar, but they can't make that game. Maybe I really want that line. I'm really a fan of that game, but it's not any good. At this point, it's not buying something else is not me going ahead and buying not a Fender jazz bass, but I'm going to go buy the Valentino or the Mike Lull or the Lakeland or something like that. I'm going to go buy a tuba. Okay, you can't play Rush on a tuba. You can. It's not going to sound the same. And so we're faced with this dilemma that sometimes we are going to have to say, you know what? I'd really like to get this. I'm excited about it, but it's so bad I can't buy this bass guitar and I have to go buy a tuba or have to buy a contrabassoon instead. And that's the sacrifice, if you will, that I think we have to be willing to make if we want this problem to change, other than simply complaining to the producers of these games. And so, the text is really important. And I agree with Anthony that we are kind of complicit in this problem that we have. But I'm not. Art's nice, layout's nice. At the end of the day, that's not why I paid my money. And if you want to have me give you that money, you better give me something worth it, or worth my cash. Don't waste my time, because otherwise, what you're telling me is, you're stupid, Ivan. Okay, that's enough of a rant. Have a good one, kids.